Greetings, ladies and mental gents, and welcome to my channel, where I like to make audio narrations of various stories from the internet. In this video, we'll be focusing on a story from the subreddit HFY called Man Becomes Myth, written by Regal Legal Eagle. The link to the original story will be down below, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. The old man in the faded-looking bear cloak looked up at the massive stone structure and wondered what the hell it was. It was a very basic sort of pyramid, made by stacking square stones atop one another. It lacked the smooth sides and refinement that he'd seen the elves use. It looked human, but that couldn't be right. Humans didn't build. He strictly forbid it. They wandered the wastes with their huts, trading the trains and the spoils that he'd torn from the Elven Empire decades ago. The Grand Warlord had been very specific about this. He wouldn't allow his people to settle on old Elven territories because not enough time passed to erase all the traces of their civilization. So when he chose the tribe at the crest of the ridge and found the structure, he was curious. But now that he was at the base, he was furious. He reached up, pointing the old bony finger at the structure. Who broke my command? And why? His current honor guard was very different than the one that he had led to victory all those years ago. These were the sons and daughters of those warriors. None of them had seen real combat, just the duels and tournaments that his people held to test their mettle and skill. He could sense their unease as they shifted around him. They knew. Someone had been hiding this from him. He hadn't thought that they had it in them, but clearly someone was defying him. If they simply wanted to kill him and take his title of Grand Warlord, he didn't mind. But this was something else. The old man glanced around, and the various warriors looked away, unable to look him in the eyes. No one is going to fess up. He was about to continue, but had to pull the silk cloth from his belt, coughing heavily as blood splattered the fabric. Once the fit had passed, he tossed the cloth to the ground, and then he saw the figures walking around the side of the structure. He knew their faces. Daughters, sons, grandsons, granddaughters. His family. This was worrisome indeed if his family was disobeying him. If anyone should understand why he kept humanity in the deep wastes, it should be them. He looked amongst the familiar faces of his kin, looking for some clue as to who their leader was. A few of the grandchildren were half-elves, which he didn't mind. Personally, the elven women were too dainty for his tastes. He had always enjoyed a strong human woman who could track down an elk on foot and then drag the kill back to the tribe. But to each their own. The first generation of the elven slaves had been separated from the children who wouldn't remember the old empire. Then they'd ordered the children to be raised no differently than any human. He felt it made the tribe stronger. Of course, the surviving elves had cursed him and for taking away their children. But if he could save their race from being slaves of fate, then he'd let them curse all they wanted. His battle was with their god, not with the elves themselves. There, in the middle of the group, was the eldest grandson, John. A clever little shirt, just like his mother. The Grand Warlord's eldest daughter, though he didn't see her amongst the ranks of the rebellious offspring. Convinced my children to rebel, have you, Jan? The old man growled out, one hand on the hilt of his old rusty sword. Several times they tried to convince him to have the finest craftsman in the land make him a new sword, worthy of his title. But he'd vow to cut the hands off any craftsman who tried and melt his sword back down anyway. It's time, grandfather. The warlord looked up at the tall, proud human before him. He was fit, athletic, and strong, with the sort of rugged looks, and the bards would likely sing for decades to come. It was no small wonder, the shriveled old man, that this was his blood before him. Time for what? Time to undo all of my hard work. He pointed at the structure. Tear it down. It's your funeral pyre, grandfather. It's time to stop wandering. We need to leave the wastes and forge our own nation of stone instead of leather huts. Who's the Grand Warlord here, you clever little twat? I set siege to the greatest empire this world has ever known. I killed the damn god in the process. His followers are now part of our tribes, even if they have no idea who he ever was. Their history is gone, just so that I could free us from the tyranny of that damned idea. We all know the stories, grandfather. Stories? Why, ask any of my honor god. They'll tell you of the campaign, won't you? He'd look back at his honor god, only to remember the original honor god was all dead. Well, not these, I suppose. That's just it, grandfather. You're the only one still alive who lived through that campaign. The Grand Warlord blinked at that and began to think. Surely there were others. He was sickly. That damn cough of his had never faded. He surely hadn't outlived everyone who remembered, had he? Some of his wives had joked that he was too bitter and angry to die, but he searched his memory for a name of some living warrior who served him to destroy the Elven Empire. None of the women who bore his children were alive either, now that he thought about it. Well, regardless, I don't remember. Not enough time has passed, and I am not dead yet. I don't need a funeral pyre. Tear it down, and we'll continue our trek. The elk herds won't wait, but I won't stand by while this does. The old man pointed at the structure again before he shrugged his bony shoulders in the giant cloak. We've done wondering, grandfather. It's time to build, not wonder. This is just the start. We'll settle here and build up a statue worthy of your status. When you pass, we'll burn you on the pyre. That's not our way, boy, the old man growled. No buildings, no burning. We use our dead waste of a good body to burn it. When I die, I want to be buried amongst the snow pines near the geysers. To the south, as is our way. Do you think that these trees just spring up? No. Our bodies give them life. Why would I want to be burned anyway? It's only fitting for a god. God! The old man bellowed, and then he had to pull up another cloth and cough into it as he was beset by a coughing fit. Once he was done, he tossed the bloody cloth into the face of his grandson, who flinched and pulled the fabric from his face, wiping away the blood with his other hand. I am no god, I'm a man. I'm a mortal. Don't you understand why I did what I did? I had cities to put to the torch. I killed every elven scholar alive. I did these things to free our people from the gods. Now you want to turn me into one. Don't you understand what I did? What all of this was for? He waved his hand at the wagons trailing the riches and spoils of his conquest. I understand fine, grandfather. It's well known that your skill as a strategist and tactician was unparalleled. Was? The younger man stared down at the old. You're a conqueror. You've freed us. You've freed the remaining elves too. But you're too old now, and it is time to build. If we're to thrive as a people, we need to settle down. You sent us to rule over the other tribes and clans, told us that you wouldn't step aside, and we'd have to divide your spoils amongst ourselves because you wanted us to compete. Keeps us strong. If we grow weak and soft, we'll fail. But we didn't. And you're soft and weak because of it. But grandfather, we've worked together. Despite wandering the wastes, we've made life for our people better. Look at this mighty structure, built by our own hands. None of the other laborers or craftsmen who built it truly knew what they were doing. And look at what we've accomplished. You've built a shrine to a god. We have no gods, and saved us from that fate. Grandfather, we do have a god. You gave us one. It's you. Damn it, I just said that I was a man. Grandfather, some people become something greater than their mortal shell. You united the clans for the first time. You destroyed the greatest empire the world has ever known. You've killed a god. His people are now our people. Their history is no more. You outlived everyone who might even remember. You're the only one alive who knows what their empire even looked like. We've been in the wastes for long enough. The old man growled. You would trade the freedom that I have given you for chains. You would undo my work if you start to worship me. I am flesh and blood. You are flesh and blood, but you represent something more. We all know that we are free to choose our own path in life, that we have no set direction. Nothing directs us but ourselves and one other thing. The old man arched a brow. What's that? You. Your orders are holding us back. If we want to advance, we have to break your commands. The old man laughed at that. You really are a clever little twat. Turned my own teachings against me. My children, your kin. What of your mother? Did she get along with this as well? Those that didn't agree are safely being watched by those loyal to the rest of us. The others elected me. Elected! The man spat out the word. The Grand Warlord is not elected. I killed my mother and my father to lead the tribe. I killed the champions of the other clans, or made them bend their knees to me in submission. The Grand Warlord is not elected. You will be the last. I will have a different title. But it is time to stop this, grandfather. We will build, and we will worship what you embody, if not your physical form. You mean more to our people as a symbol than a leader now anyways. Most of the new generation thinks you as little more than a legend and myth, despite the fact that you live and breathe still. The old man stared at the younger man for a moment. You forget one thing. What's that, grandfather? I'm armed. He pulled the old sword free, surprising his kin as he slashed out. If his grandson hadn't been faster, he would be dead. But even so, he was left with a gash across his eye and cheek. The eye should still work, but the blood seeping into it blinded him for now. The man gasped in pain, trying to pull back, and the old man growled and stabbed, cutting the line across the ribs. The fancy clothes that he wore providing little protection against the blade. Fight or die. When he slashed once more, his grandson caught the blade in his hand, carrying the pain of the old blade cut into his palm. But he swung out with his other and he punched the old man in the chin, making him stagger back. This gave John a chance to pull the blade free. It was well crafted and fancy, but it had never seen combat. The old man bellowed and swung his blade overhead, figuring the young man would make his mistake and raising his fancy blade to block it and only have a shatter. But John surprised the old man by lunging forward, driving the sword through the old man's chest. The Grand Warlord gasped, coughed up blood. It was a familiar thing to him, but very different now. His bony old frame sagged as his grandson clutched him tight. John's eyes were wide. He bore an expression the old man hadn't seen in so long. You've... He had to cough up a bit more blood. Never killed anyone, have you? No, grandfather. I never needed to. The old man smiled and coughed again. Maybe. You were right. Maybe it's time. He desperately wanted to tell him not to burn his body, to bury him with his kin in the snow pines, to not worship him and build shrines. But his time had finally come. Wanting to say more mattered little when you couldn't. He felt his body being laid back against the ground as his eyes closed. When he opened them, he was still in the wastes, but he was alone. No structure, no kin, no other god. He heard a roar and turned to find that he wasn't alone after all. There was a massive bear, a few feet away from him, sniffing at his body. The old man growled and rose, waving his sword, but the bear didn't retreat or attack. It just sat there and looked at him. And then he noticed another figure that he'd missed. It wore black and carried an axe and an ornately carved shaft. The wind made the figure's black robe snap and flutter, but it did not speak. The bear let out a groan as it stared at the old man. What do you want? He growled back. He wishes to serve you. He has waited a very long time for this. The voice came from nowhere, and of very certainty the figure in black. The old man stared at the bear and realized it. It was the one that he killed from the start of his path, the one he wore for all of this time as a symbol of his strength. Why? He understands you. You're strong. He's watched you, followed you. Rather than join his kin, he wishes to serve you. The old man sheathed his sword then. Very well. I'm not sure what good he is, but I'll let him serve me. He looked around the barren waste for a moment. So this is it. I'm dead. I expected to see my kin. The gods have told their followers many things about what comes next. They all lie. There is nothing after but peace. What about him? He pointed at the bear. You said he could join his kin. The figures were silent when the old man worked it out. Ah, right. That's his piece. Well then how would he serve me? And why are you here? You are a special case. The gods are only as strong as the belief in them. You killed the god of fate. This left a void. A curious thing happened. Your people began to believe, not in a god, but in you. I'm just a man. No, you're not just a man. You're a now myth. More than that, an ideal. This has a power unlike any that I've seen before. You must follow me and take your place. The figure turned and opened up the door that he had stood in front of. The old man followed the figure, and the massive bear followed the old man. Suddenly, they were walking through the massive gilded halls filled with statues, shrines, and lavish displays of wealth and power. The old man hated it. He was led to the massive table that seemed to hold a map, but it was unlike any that he'd seen before. It rose and fell with the mountains and valleys. The water shimmered and moved. There were even little clouds that floated above it. Around the table were massive and mighty figures that soon he recognized. The gods that still remained. This is the god killer, bellowed the massive orc that had to be 15 feet tall, clad in intricate gold armor. This wretched little thing. He is stronger than any of you. So great is the faith of his people. The old man chuckled as he saw the looks on the faces of the gods. He stepped forward and he took his place at the table, dwarfed by the other mighty creatures. Even the god of dwarves was far larger than him. He found an intricate station before him. It looked like a glass sphere of some sort. What's this? That's how you communicate with your followers, how you command them, give them visions, instruct them, said the dwarf, who eyed him with suspicion. The old man drew his sword and smashed the sphere with it, stepping back as it exploded in a wave of energy that made all the other gods stagger back. You fool! You think you will make it free? How do you expect to win the game if you don't direct your pieces? He waved at the table, and the old man suddenly noticed the various pieces of the map. Is that what you do? You play with the lives of your believers to try win some sort of game? It's not some game, the center god scolded him. It's the game. Well, I don't need it. In fact, it would defeat the whole point in freeing my people. They will succeed or fail on their own. He looked at the board and noticed a tiny cluster of humanity in the wastes far across the land and oceans from all of the other pieces. He noted the mighty fortresses, the citadels, mighty armies and nations, all the temples and cities that belonged to the other gods, and then he looked back up at them. I'm just here to watch you all lose. End of story. If you enjoyed this story and wish to support the author, the link is down below. If you would like to support this channel, there are numerous ways to do so. They will also be listed in the description down below. But the easiest way to help this channel is to share it, subscribe, and like. And, as always, I will see you all in the next video, and I hope that you have a good one. Cheers!